Hey everybody, welcome to the Lavante bi-monthly web series featuring our Lavante SIM, where we talk about how we can simplify supplier information management. The presentation that we're giving today is going to be a little bit unlike maybe some other webinars that you've sat in on, mainly because the phone lines are open. That doesn't mean that you have to speak, and I don't mean to put anyone on the spot, but just so you know, we don't have anyone muted. We have a quaint group on the phone today, and we have the phone lines open, so at any point during the presentation, you need to feel free to ask questions, ask me to re-explain anything that we're talking about, or if you want to see something again, go ahead and point that out. But that's what we're doing, so it's a little bit unlike traditional webinars that you may have taken part in, but we like to take these groups on every 2 weeks or so and do an exploration of what supplier information management means to the folks that are attending these calls, and see if we can answer some questions both in the presentation material or directly if you wanted to shout something out in the middle of what I'm about to present. That said, I am Tom Flynn. I did not provide an introduction slide. I probably could have. It would have been nice just to see who's going to be rambling on for the next, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, who knows. I'm one of the co-founders of Lavante. Currently, I head up the sales group, and supplier information management has been a passion of mine for several years. Part of our core product, which is recovery auditing, has always focused on our ability, Lavante's ability to communicate en masse with suppliers. And the supplier information management product, which has really been coming into its own for the last 3 years, and is now seeing a brand new version hit the market. You can see some screens of it now on the slide in front of you all on your computer monitor. The supplier information management product out now is really an extension of the expertise that we've accomplished in communicating out with suppliers en masse on behalf of our clients. So what I'm going to do is just going to show a little bit of high-level information about Lavante. And you guys, like I said, this is probably a more casual presentation than you may have experienced in other webinars. I don't know if I've properly disabled all of my alerts, and I also have someone in the room with me, Chris, who's pushing and bending some of the slides and making sure that everything operates correctly because I'm not so technical. So if you see any disruptions or hear some giggling in the background or something pops up on the screen, I certainly apologize, but it doesn't take away anything from the pedigree of our company. We've been around for about 11 years. I should actually correct that to say moving on 12 years now. We have been delivering technology solutions to companies and suppliers. We've put together a board of directors and a management team from a lot of real stalwarts in different technical spaces, technology spaces. We focused a lot on companies that work one-to-many. So maybe it's a large company that works up to a huge consumer population, or a company that really works on supply chain, company that figured out internal piping for large organizations, companies that have created ERP applications. We've brought together really good minds from these different organizations to help create a solution for supplier information management. Like I said, supplier information management is one product alongside of our supplier credit recovery, and we base that on a platform that is the only patented technology of its kind in the marketplace, and it also works with a supplier network of about 2 million connections, about 2 million different suppliers that we pull out of. Now, obviously, in our long history, we've worked with more than 2 million suppliers, but we like to keep a refreshed database of about that $2 million connection plateau, because we know that that's fresh data, that's up-to-date data, and then we can constantly match that and make sure the integrity of that data that we've recently populated is strong. We use the technology and the network as a foundation to help our companies better communicate with their suppliers. What we try to do is address a huge, huge problem in the industry. And I'm going to outline what I think is a big problem in the industry. I'm going to talk about some of the solutions that you can contemplate and how our solution rolls up into that. And then maybe about 5 minutes from now, 7 minutes from now, we'll be jumping into the actual application. I'll be showing a high-level view of our application. And the hope is that if we've piqued your curiosity or if you have any more interest in this, you can take a one-on-one meeting with one of our representatives to do more of a deep dive into how the application works and then ask specific questions about how it could work for you. Again, the phone lines are open, so if you have any specific questions, about how it works for you. I certainly encourage you to do that now, but not everybody wants to kind of go to that level of detail if they think other people are watching. However, if you do, I'm absolutely game to follow you wherever you want to go. First and foremost, I present this slide. This is a very, very simple presentation of your company on the left side, and I've demonstrated that with one tall building to be your HQ, and then a couple of smaller satellite offices. All those little colored discs off to the side and above the other buildings, those represent different departments, whether it's procurement, tax, risk, accounts payable, etc. And then I have a vast array on the on the right side of the screen, a vast array of little factory buildings that represent your suppliers. Now, of course, your suppliers are not all factory buildings. I don't mean to indicate that at all. I just needed an icon. I repeated this icon several times, and that represents your suppliers. That big mound of spaghetti between your company and your supplier population represents all the emails, phone calls, personal conversations, faxes, letters, documents, different POs, invoices, all the communication and all the transactions that you have. I've tried to represent with this just confused aggregation of all these different lines going in all these different directions. And I think that represents the confusion that can sometimes take root when you try to manage communication over a vast array of supplier population. Now, it gets confusing because you have so many systems and so many different departments. Also, when you set up a supplier, their data begins to decay immediately. You set up a supplier with a name, address, phone number, contact person, etc., and all of a sudden, in 3 months or 6 months, something might change. Maybe it's your contact person. Maybe something major happened. I hear a beeping on the phone, so if you've just joined us, welcome. I'll take a moment just to reiterate some of the ground rules. We are running this webinar with open phone lines today. You don't have to say anything, but if you have any questions, just so you know, we can't hear the other folks on the phone, so you can stop me at any point and ask any questions or ask me to re-clarify. Right now, I'm on about the third slide of our presentation, just talking about the difficulty of supplier communication. And I was really just getting into how supplier data decays over time. And then if you do want to have compliance or communication with your suppliers on a consistent basis, it requires a lot of touches. Sometimes you need to make a phone call or an email. Sometimes you need to send out a letter or a fax. You may need to go through your sales group. You may need to go through purchasing. Sometimes it's very convoluted, and this becomes a confused process. So we muse over the fact that there is a solution. Visually, I represent the solution by a simple cloud. Now, we hear a lot of conversations about cloud. It probably either makes us nauseous to think that somebody else has a cloud solution, or maybe some thoughts about security or how would it work, where would it install, how do I get IT involved. All those thoughts come flushing in. But before we even jump into that, assume that we have all the security provisions and that this is deployed successfully at many other locations and making people very happy. The principle of what this cloud platform can do is give a single source of truth. If you move away from that spaghetti bowl of confusion on the previous slide, you now have one arrow back and forth from your company on the left-hand side of the screen up into this application, the Lavante Connect platform. So all the information that you would really want to get, all the data that you want to collect on behalf of your suppliers, resides up in this application, and you can get this information on a 24/7 basis. You share this information with all the other different departments in your company, but of course you have the ability to assign roles and permissions so that not everybody is getting willy-nilly the pick of all the information. You can create some controls around information. And then on the right side, your vast array of suppliers equally has that two-way communication with the application. They're meant to go online and update information that you're looking to update. Now, right now, our solution focuses on supplier data, supplier information. I make that distinction now because people will always ask, well, what kind of data are you collecting? It really is supplier attribute data. We're not flipping POs. We're not doing invoice visibility. Some plans for that are in our future releases. We can kind of drill into that in a different conversation. But right now, it really focuses on supplier data, all the data that you need to have so that you can do successful business with your suppliers. They have the opportunity to update that data to you, and then you have the ability from the application to ping them on a fairly consistent basis and ask them to update any data that you notice has decayed or is no longer up to date. The product we focus on the Lavante Connect application is SIM. SIM stands for Supplier Information Management, if you haven't figured that out by now. And the icon, I use it right, I think is an important icon because the 5 boxes on the perimeter of that icon represent the 5 business processes that we enable. So, of course, starting from the top and going clockwise, we have a real-time reporting and monitoring engine. So everything that gets up there is presented to you in real time. We upload supplier data files. It's all integrated and simple to use. There's a huge vendor data cleansing and enrichment capacity of this application. So if you feel like you have duplicate vendors or missing data from your vendors or data that you want to just clean up in general, a lot of that is done in the application. It has multiple forms of outreach to the suppliers, so you can feel very confident that you're leveraging our patented technology to communicate with your suppliers in mass. You could have 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 100,000. I've seen data files with 500,000 suppliers, and we give you the best opportunity to communicate with the widest population of them. And then finally, that final box on the perimeter talks about self-service vendor onboarding. You can extend that to mean self-service vendor data updating. So even if the vendor's already onboarded, but you want to ping that supplier or reach out to them and get them to update any type of information, whether it's a diversity status or it's an insurance certificate, a W-9, what have you, all of that is self-service and the supplier's doing that. I've listed a couple other things that the supplier can accomplish at the website. I think everybody at this point has enough time on this page to be able to kind of peruse over that and take out any nuggets from there. But that's essentially what SIM enables you to do. There's a host of benefits. I've just listed 5. I think these are fairly high level. Anybody who's interested or kind of wants to have a more philosophical discussion about it, we can get into what some of the more drill down benefits are. But for the most part, you improve communication, you reduce costs, and save time. Now that benefit is related to many different functions that we enable and replace for you. And also there's a whole procurement element of this where you can make more strategic buying decisions with the information you gather so you can reduce costs. So that bullet alone doesn't say enough, but suffice it to say that's a huge benefit. Reducing risk is always on everybody's radar. And then some of the higher level stuff about delivering accurate data and some of the visibility that we create. So those are some of the benefits. I get back to this one overarching slide. Now this one overarching slide, again, is the backdrop of the Lavante system. What I'm going to do is just show 2 more slides, then I'll stop talking about these PowerPoint slides because I know not everybody puts at the top of the list of things to do is get bored by a PowerPoint slide deck. So I'll get through this quickly and get into the app. But I did want to level set for everybody, what are we going to look at today? Essentially, we go full cycle where what we ask our clients to do is to upload vendor master file data. At our application, we enrich that data with our network database, a couple of the third-party firms that we partner from, and then once we get a really healthy population of supplier data, we encircle your supplier population with an orchestration of email, mail, telephone calls, faxes, and perform a multi-mode outreach effort so that we can communicate with the maximum number of suppliers possible. This is not just one and done. We don't request it one time with one email blast. It really is an orchestration, and it's a series of defaults. If the supplier doesn't respond to this method, we try another method. If they don't respond to that method, we try another method. You can help dial in the timing. Sometimes you want to wait 1 week. Sometimes you want to wait 3 months before you try another communication. And also, I mentioned at the first slide that there's a network. So if you don't have information pertaining to that supplier, we may have that information, a fax number, an email address, et cetera, in our network, and we can help that drive that communication where you wouldn't otherwise have any recourse to do that on your own. The suppliers get communicated with, and then they go to the portal, and of course they self-divulge all sorts of information. We'll look at that application in just a moment where you can see what the supplier's experience is like, and then to complete the loop, you gain online access to all that supplier data. So just to sort of take that theme, you have company self-serve on one side, supplier self-serve on the other side. When we go through the application, it really cuts in half. You have the company's experience, that's the first thing that we're going to go through, and the company will go on their own application. So we'll look at some charts and graphs and slides, and then the supplier is invited, either in mass or on a one-off, from the company, from your company, and then they will go on the application and they'll be asked to fill out their profile. And they'll be told that they're 79% complete or 16% complete, et cetera, and then we walk them through a series of steps to complete their profile. Both sides of the application, it's a two-sided application. How do suppliers get data in? How do you take it out? Look very similar. So if you're looking at this for the first time, and if there's anything going on in the background, I'm not suggesting anyone would spend any attention on anything else right now, but if there is anything else going on in the background, if you blink, you're going to see two applications that look similar. I'll try to keep you true north so that you understand when it's the client experience and when it's the supplier experience. But both client and supplier have recourse to go to this website and pull down and upload just volumes of information that make commerce run so much more smoothly for both of them. So what I'll do is right now I'm going to transition into the presentation itself, the application itself. At that point, like I mentioned before, the phone lines are open, so if anyone wants to ask me a question to level set or just to recreate the coordinates for yourself, now's probably a fairly good time to do that. Otherwise, obviously, we've all seen, probably 1,000 different versions of this. We're at a login screen. I'm going to give you one of our demo logins. There's a couple of them, depending on where we go, if there's any questions. I just may jump into another type of demo or another example of the demo. But for now, I was heavily influenced by Wile E. Coyote as a youth. Probably many of the people on the phone were as well. So when we decided to make a demonstration for the SIM application, heavily influenced by our favorite cartoon from the past, we used the Acme logo to represent the dummy corporation. In your mind, you can substitute the name of your company for this logo here. Again, this is the client experience. So everything we're going to show in this application is what you would be going through and what you would be seeing. Now, what I want to do is I want to move through this fairly quickly. Right now, the page we've landed on is the high-level dashboard. Once you get 2, 3, 4 months into a project like this, you're going to have a lot of colorful data populating these graphs and charts and numbers, etc. Right now, most of us can probably get our minds around it, but it's a little premature. I think before we can look at this level of detail, I like to start on the right side of the navigational menu. Right here you can see there's a main navigational menu. It shows the dashboard. That's where we land. There's a supplier library of all your suppliers. And then there's a couple of options that you can do to get started. Where I want to draw everyone's attention first is Manage Contacts. Now, if you click on the Manage Contacts tab, here's your opportunity to determine in your organization, in which different division in your organization, which job title from which department has access to the system. Now, you can add a contact. And I think all of you kind of know how this goes. I'm not going to open every box. I think you guys can assume where these boxes go. And you can talk about, who in what department, let's say Sally Smith, et cetera, needs to be set up. You can also determine which address is she part of, because you may want to keep it confined to just a certain number of addresses. And you can go through a series of very simple steps and assign your contacts that are responsible for working on your supplier information management system. Now, you can let your imagination wander. Who in your organization would you like to give some access to suppliers? Maybe tax, maybe treasury, procurement certainly, AP of course, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's got to be a lot more questions that come from me saying that, but of course you can throw them out now, or any one of our representatives is available after this presentation if that seems interesting. Once you set up your contacts, you then want to manage your files. Now, when we get to the Manage File tabs, there's probably two major things you're ever going to want to do with files. I will keep it very simple. You're going to want to upload files to get your data into the system so that we can start communicating with your suppliers. Right now our system is blank. You send in a vendor master file. Several questions usually come flooding in after this. Number one is, what if there's multiple files? What if we can't get the file simply? What if we have to get IT involved? How do we map it to our system? All those questions are information that we have frequently asked questions that we have either in quick access at the right side of the page, or information that we've handled 100 times before, so we can get you answers on that. But suffice it to say, we focus on a very simple workflow here where you want to upload a file, you want to select the file, that might be your complete supplier file, and then you can browse whatever drive you think is appropriate so that you can find, I'm just going to pick a random Excel spreadsheet, and let's say we import this into the field. Now, I haven't actually picked a vendor master file, so I'm not going to upload it. I'll cancel it. But like every good cooking show, we show you how to make the ingredients and put them together, and then we already have one in the oven. You can see here where I already have a VMF, a vendor master file. It's a file that I have already run for the most part, and you can see here where it's just loading and showing the time and the time of day when it was initially run. So that's how you upload your file. This information and the progress of this file shows up here. It also shows up on that colorful dashboard page that we initially landed on. So that's kind of how you upload files. Of course, you're going to have questions about what template should I use. We have a very modest template library here just for demonstration purposes, but you can download the vendor master file template. It could show you the different column headings, and then you can copy that file, those headings, create that in IT or yourself if you have access to the proper databases, and then upload it from here. Or perhaps it's significantly more complicated than that, sophisticated than that, and you require a little bit more hands-on. That's absolutely fine as well. Now, once you get this information up into the application, we want to communicate out with your suppliers, update data, and at some point, you're going to want to take that refreshed, clean data that's been treated and download the file. Now, I think this tab will be fairly self-explanatory. You can either take the entire clean supplier file, or you can pull an incremental file. Perhaps you want to pull the file daily. Perhaps you want to pull it weekly. Perhaps you want to pull it monthly. Let's say you want to go back in time and say, I want it from September 1st through, let's just go back and say the last day of September for the sake of argument, and you get a file that's refreshed and updated, and you want to pull that back into your ERP system with all the refreshed data on a monthly basis. You can request this file, and again, we have a couple of these files that we've already pulled previously that are just sort of stacking up here. We've pulled these for demonstration purposes, and then multiple people can pull them for different reasons, et cetera, et cetera. Again, that's how you upload files into the system. That's how you download files. Now, from here, we've talked about managing your contacts and managing your files. The whole purpose of managing the contacts and files is because you're starting an initiative to communicate out with your suppliers. You're going to want your suppliers to come into the application. Remember, we cut the page in half and we said suppliers have their own application. We're not looking at it now, but the supplier application is very much determined by your configuration. Now, you have the opportunity to create profile fields, your system and methodology associated with outreach, timing, how frequent, what a letter may look like, et cetera, with the communication templates, and then some workflows for approvals, et cetera, et cetera. I think everybody basically gets this information here. And then as you go through the different profile fields, you can determine some simple stuff. Right now we're in the section called company profile information. That's basic data. That's the stuff you're going to find on Wikipedia. Company business name. You might say, yeah, that's required. I certainly want my supplier to fill out their company business name. I want them to fill out who they're doing business as. I want them to fill out their company registration. I want them to fill out if they have U.S. income, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In some cases, you might say, I absolutely need them to fill out their remit to and order from, and I need to be notified when they do that. So hopefully everybody has a clear vision of that on the screen. We don't need to walk through this. I think everyone's probably taken part in an exercise like this. You really only need to touch this one time. And when you do that, we're happy to sit down with you and kind of walk through some best practices of how to do it. If anything is set up and it creates a workflow gap, that's no problem at all. Obviously, this is very much point and click, and we can reshape it and rephrase it as we go. But just so you know, you have the opportunity to do that here. So what we've walked through is you manage your contacts, you manage your files, you manage the configuration, so that's the supplier experience. And now you've pretty much set everything up so you can reach out to suppliers. Your suppliers start coming into the network and updating their data. I've now moved to a suppliers page. So you can see here where this is one of the remaining tabs in the main navigation. And we're at the supplier, what I call the supplier library. So this is your supplier database. In this case, we've done our level best, everybody, to fill in 1,000 different pieces of supplier information, 1,000 different suppliers. We have a couple different column headers here. This is configurable. You may want to know what the organization associated with the supplier is. For instance, you may have 4 organizations that could bring on a supplier, north, south, east, and west. Maybe you want to dump that into these row headers or column headers. I don't know, but there's configurability. And from this page, you can do a lot of things having to do with searching the supplier database. In this case, on the main page, obviously you can search suppliers by supplier ID. I don't think I need to spell this out too much, but let's say you want to find all suppliers by ACM. You'd get a stack of the ACM suppliers. You can select all the ACM suppliers, and then these buttons light up down here. Maybe you want to start an outreach project. Maybe you want to send them a personal, or excuse me, a specific email for this population of suppliers. You may want to just choose one of them, and you choose to deactivate them, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll have the ability to go through all the different suppliers and make those types of decisions. There's a whole host of other things you're going to want to search through. The legal identification, this will show you suppliers and where they stand in terms of collecting and validating TINs. We also have something for OFAC screening. So like this would obviously roll up into risk, into fraud, validating addresses. And then there's also a host of suppliers where you requested, hey, if they change something, I want to know so that I can notify it or notify it and approve it. Again, it all rolls up into the fact that we have a supplier library, and you have the ability to kind of walk through that. Now with that, I'm close to the bottom of the hour. What I want to do is I want to go back to the dashboard page and just say all the information we've populated, all the requests to suppliers to fill out that supplier attribute data, that supplier information, all starts to populate these reports. Which suppliers have been invited and which ones have registered. Which suppliers have we been able to effectively outreach, and then, for instance, which ones registered properly, which ones started filling out their profile but it's incomplete, which ones fully filled out their profile. There's a lot of different stages here in the profile completion workflow, but we can kind of walk through that and show you how to look at them in larger buckets. You are onboarding new suppliers on a monthly basis. There's a report for it. I just pulled a couple of very important supplier field reports here, suppliers by spend diversity. That may or may not be important to you as well. OFAC screening, etc. And then you have the option to kind of, collapse different pages, or maybe you want to view something at a full page or back. And it just sort of gives you flexibility here. So this is where you land. I love this page too because it's a to-do list. So any reports that you pull or any pending projects or pending action items all get listed here. And then there's a series of quick links. You may want to look for, that tax identification report we drilled down to on another tab. You may want to screen for OFAC in a quick link, etc. Or, as we transition to the supplier experience now, you may want to invite a new supplier. And what I'll do here is I'm going to show you a demo that we go through. One supplier that we always rely on is a fictional supplier called MC Solutions. Any resemblance of some sort of real supplier is purely coincidental. I'm sure there's an MC Solution somewhere, but we just kind of picked this up because the initials of somebody who worked here was MC. We have a contact person here is, let's call him Bob Baker, and I don't need to fill this whole thing out, but we would fill this whole thing out and then we would invite that supplier. The invitation has been set. Now, obviously, I have some of the filtrations a little bit loose, so we can just click through some of these things without filling all the information. I don't want you guys to fall asleep while I fill out all the fields. But that invitation goes out, and a supplier, now again, we're looking at the supplier side of the house. I'm just going to show this image again real quick. We just spent, excuse me, we don't need to go. We just spent a long time looking at the customer side of the house. Now we're going to look at the supplier side of the house. And we get ourselves to the position of an invitation. Now this invitation we've kind of thrown the kitchen sink at. It has a lot of verbiage on this invitation. But what's important, and you can configure this a bit if you don't want it to look exactly like this, or instead of 6 steps, you can maybe get away with 3 steps, etc. But you have your logo up here. Remember, you're on the Wile E. Coyote team. And then you have the Lavante logo, and you're telling people that you are working on Lavante Connect to secure supplier information, and that you must have the legal name of your business as registered with the IRS and tax identification number. That's how they get started, everybody. They click this link here, and they go to their sign-in page. I'll do that in just a moment. I want to point out one other thing. Possibly you've requested Bob to fill that out, but Bob knows that Sharon should be filling this out. So he has the opportunity to say, if you're not the contact for Acme Communications, you can go to this other page and supply another person's name. So that's nice functionality here, and also we capture that audit trail. In case Bob converts into Sharon, we now have a new person. So let's assume Bob goes to the login page. He accepts a couple of quick T's and C's, and he goes through this setup. Now, the setup asks for some basic level setting information such as password, preferred language, which we'll pick English, a challenge question, your childhood nickname was, let's call it Bo, and then moving on to the next page. Here's where we start to capture really substantial data. Let's say Bob is in the AR department and he wants to give you his phone number. He's at 800 such and such, such and such. And then we're asking him to put his official company name and a TIN number, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And he's researched this. At this point, he's now started the process of giving you a TIN number. We still have recourse to get the W-9 if you need the W-9. And he can send that information directly to the IRS from here. We will capture this information, and on a daily basis, we take all the information that's been filled out here, and we ping it against the IRS website. We find out, does this match? If it does match, no problem. If it doesn't match, we'll go back out to Bob and say, hey, look, there seems to be a mismatch in your tax information. At that point, though, we don't stop him at this point. We wouldn't do the match right now, because now that he has all the momentum in the world and all the reason in the world to go to the next slides and fill that out, we want him to just fill this information out, put in a test-only signature, and submit. At this point after submittal, on one rail, that IRS validation takes place, and then another rail, he goes into a profile page so he can fill out different profile information. A question we always get right here is, we work with a lot of companies that have Canadian suppliers. There is a slightly different workflow for different areas of the world. So you can have GST or HST for Canadian suppliers. But also, if there's still U.S.-based income, you still revert back to some of that IRS TIN information as well. So at that point, as all this is getting reconciled at the IRS website, on a parallel track, Bob is able to submit this data, and then he goes into his supplier page. Now, again, there's MC Solutions on this. Bob has a couple different companies that he works with. Acme is not the only one. So he's already filled out some information. He's even put his logo, and he's even filled some company-level data. So his, instead of being 0% correct, his profile is already 79% correct. On this page here, this is his home page, he has some resources that he can pull from, such as a W-9, and if he has any questions about those legal docs. He has a help desk at Lavante that he can call if he needs assistance. And then he has information specific to Acme. You can populate this with whatever you want. You can put your name. You're going to take a couple phone calls if you do. Or maybe you can embed a couple code of ethics or code of conduct policies. Bob can review that information. Once he feels good about that, he goes to his profile. And the profile, I will not spend I won't spend a lot of time on these pages. This mirrors the configuration that you set up. The profile works in a couple different ways depending on how Bob goes through a to-do list. He has an actual list of items that he can click through, or he has some chevrons that he can advance through at the top of the page. So he can move from company details, fill out all this information, and move to business level details. Or right now we're in business level details, he can click back to the company logo. So hopefully all that information translates, and you can see the different ways with which Bob or your supplier can move freely through the system. He fills out this data, and then he can advance to the next page. And it's just a series of going through all the different questions and supplying the answers that you need him to supply so that you can do business with him. For instance, if he's a diverse business, he can click yes. He can fill out additional information, and if there's a document or certificate that goes along with it, he can browse his hard drive and upload that document as well. And then I'll move down the page fairly slowly so you can see any other type of information that we're endeavoring to capture on your behalf. You may want to configure the different supplier types that you're working with. You may want to capture your different insurance certificates. You may have a whole host of certificates, and you can add new certificates and configure them so that we're seeing the type of information you want to collect, and you're storing it at one source. Ultimately, the last tab is relationship-specific details. This is details that only you share with Bob. So he can choose Acme as the company, send you the different primary contacts, and then scroll down this list to see the kind of information you're trying to share specifically with the supplier, maybe a payment type that's supported. Perhaps he tells you, hey, I can do EFTs, I prefer wire transfer, create an authorization, fill in some other detail level information so that you can perform that type of functionality with him very quickly. With that, you can see the rest of the page, that the flavor and the level of information that we're storing. Also has the option to say if there's any conflict of interest. And then, again, it's certifying under a penalty of perjury that all the information is true, and he can put it in another electronic signature. At that point, he's pursuing 100% completion, and then you have all that data for yourself to be able to go into the application, I'm going back to your dashboard page, so I just made a big jump from Bob's experience back to yours. And as Bob fills all that information, not only is it represented in the different changes on the dashboard, but also in your supplier library, Bob is going to have a profile here in the supplier library. Let's say Bob is associated, he was with MC Solutions before, now if he's with Smart Technologies, you'll have a profile card of all this information filled out. Now, with that, everybody, that's the information that I am prepared to present today. I tried to present, I wanted to keep it under 45 minutes. We've effectively done that. I tried to present this at a high enough level where you can get a flavor for what we're doing, what we're trying to accomplish, and the value that we can present to your company or to your network or to you in your daily tasks. At the same time, though, I know there's a lot more drill down, a lot more questions, and a lot more specifics that we haven't covered today. And obviously, myself or anyone at Lavante is available to have that type of conversation. We have a list of the different people who've joined this call, so we'll reach out to you. What I should be showing you here is a final slide with my contact information. Otherwise, I'll just leave it for you. Again, my name is Tom Flynn with Lavante. That's tom.flynn, and Flynn is spelled F-L-Y-N-N, at lavante.com. If you have any questions or you require any follow-up at all, absolutely happy to take that. So with that, everybody, I appreciate you joining us for one of our bi-monthly webinars. That's the information I have prepared today. Other than that, hopefully we'll be talking to you very soon. Have a brilliant rest of your week, and until then.